I saw this tweet from Andy Ngo. He lives in Portland. He said, "This is the type of street anarchy that routinely happens where I live. Here is a video from the 6th of October showing Antifa directing traffic in downtown and threatening people who don't obey with violence. Mayor Ted Wheely, who really runs this town?" So let's play this, and I don't know if we'll play the whole thing, but, you know.
Oh, can I? Well, shut the fuck up! Start your traffic, dumb bitch!
Just go that way. Because I told you to.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Don't hurt
Yeah,
me.
brother.
Just go.
Yeah, you little white little fucker.
Really?
No.
Yeah. You're a fucking little whitey, aren't you? The First Amendment, get the fuck down the road.
Please just keep going the direction.
Just please turn right,
Please
for
go
Christ's
the
sake.
direction I asked
For
you to
Jesus
go.
Christ's sake, just turn
Please,
right.
you're
will ya?
blocking traffic and they're getting this to
we're
you.
blocking traffic.
You can turn. You can just turn. Just go. Just go. Just turn, please. Please just
Now
keep
you're gonna have to
going.
wait, 'cause you got cars coming.
Oh.
Bro, what do we do here? Oh, you're from South Carolina. You are a little whitey supremacist. North Carolina, huh?
Right.
I'm a white supremacist because I'm white. Are you kidding me?
Go back to North Carolina where you came from. We don't need your KKK in Portland, Oregon. KKK from North Carolina. Someone shut the fuck up so I can speak. I got traffic. I got traffic. Ask me if I give a fuck. I was talking to him, not you. Thank you very much.
But I'm in the middle. I'm in the middle of the intersection. And if I can have someone
Fucking dumbass. I know you to hit me right now. I'll beat the shit out of you. I'll beat the shit out of you with him. Fuck him. Whoa,
Watch
whoa,
that.
whoa,
Whoa,
whoa, whoa,
whoa.
whoa. Yeah. Slow down.
Slow down.
Dumbass.
Whoa.
Slow down. There's no reason
See, there's another video about what happens when an elderly man doesn't obey their rules. But I want to point out, you see them yelling at them, calling them whitey, insulting them, just generally berating these people. The police don't do that. The police will just be like, carry on. Sometimes they do. You know, sometimes cops can be assholes. That's true. But these people yelling at other people in cars, calling them white supremacists, blocking the road. Now let's look at what happens when you disobey. So, do you feel like living in Portland? This is what happens when people take over the streets and you disobey them. And this is a terrifying prospect. There are substantially more people who live in Portland who don't like the violence than who do. But when you have even a small group, 30, 40 people, they're going to overwhelm an individual. That guy simply turned right and they were hitting his car because, look, often I've been to these protests. It is ridiculously easy to predict how they will behave. If you drive and you see a protest and you do nothing, they might start beating your car for no reason. If you go like, yeah, go for it, they'll cheer for you and walk past you and leave you alone. If you don't cheer for them, if you yell at them or even ask them to move, they'll start whacking your car like we just saw. They even, almost attacked this guy. I was surprised that guy he actually got out of his car. That was nuts. So this was a Portland demonstration protesting the death of Patrick Kimmons, who was shot by police. It's not like this was a random occurrence where a bunch of people just got out and started beating people and locking up the streets, but it's still alarming that this kind of thing happens. It's one thing if you want to say you have a First Amendment right to protest. I agree with you. You do. It's another thing when the guy's screaming that you're a white supremacist and you're a white fucker. Like, that's actually rather scary. So there's a phenomenon that happens in the Bay Area that I've talked about before. I was at a bar, and on the window was an anti-Trump sign, and I asked the bartender if they were anti-Trump, and they kind of just, kind of like, and I said, then why, like, they weren't really strong about it. They were like, yeah, we don't like Trump. And I'm like, oh, you don't sound too enthusiastic. I mean, is it just, are you just trying to make sure no one breaks your window? Because I know that's a common thing. And they went, yeah, that's basically it. There was a Burger King in, I believe it was Oakland, with a big sign in its window saying, "We are not a corporate shop, we are a family-owned franchise. Please don't destroy our windows," or something to that effect. In Berkeley, all of the windows of the shops, most of them, have signs saying they support the far left, activism, intersectional feminism, etc. And I have been told by people the reason is, if they don't, their windows will be smashed. That is not a free society. That is an oppressed society where you are living under the thumb of violent mobs who will attack you if you don't obey arbitrary rules. That's terrifying. There's a photo from Hamburg during the G20 where you can see all these storefronts smashed up and fires. There's one storefront that wasn't smashed up. Why? In their window was the Antifa sign. They left them alone, and that's like dictatorship. That's authoritarianism. If you agree with us and defend us, we won't destroy your life. That is truly terrifying. I was reading an article about how oppressive regimes will force activists to denounce the resistance and the revolution on camera. And that's basically the same thing. The mob shows up and destroys your life and destroys your property. They attack you in the street unless you agree to their rules. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if when those cars pulled up to the protest, if someone leaned out and started yelling something like Black Lives Matter, and then asked them where they, and then said like, "Hey man, that's really awesome. I'm so proud of you guys. I'm trying to get to this street. How do I go through?" They'll be like, "We'll let you through," because if you agree with them, they're fine. I have seen protests where cars were just minding their own business. Protesters started jumping up and down on them and bashing on them while insulting the drivers and calling them white supremacists and things like that. I have seen protests where the people in the car will reach their fist out and go, "Yeah," and everyone goes, "Yeah," and leaves them alone, because that's how it works. That's how it works with violent authoritarian mobs. But let's read a little bit about what this protest was on about. It's from Oregon Live. More than 100 marched through downtown Portland on Saturday to protest the death of Patrick Kimmons, who was fatally shot by police officers last Sunday. The group, which included members of Kimmons' family, gathered near a memorial supporters have set up near Southwest 4th Avenue and Harvey Milk Street, at the parking lot where the shooting occurred. They marched to the downtown Justice Center, where speakers, including relatives of Kimmons, demanded police accountability in the shooting. "We're not here to riot, we're here for justice," said Charles Kimmons, a family member. "We need to fight this all the way to the end. These cops need to be locked up." Yes, if a cop did something wrong, then I agree. They should, you go to jail, you break the law, you go to jail. You kill someone without just, if the cops wrongly killed somebody, they should be in trouble for it. But the problem often with the left is their willingness to embrace incivility and violence. That man screaming, "You're a whitey, you white fucker," and things like that. That guy was white. It's the weirdest thing to me. There's an article from the New York Times about, it said something like, "White women, you need to come get your people." And it was written by a white woman. And it's really strange to me that you have these weird white people who hate white people, and I can't understand it. Let's talk about what's going on in the street, though. This isn't entirely uncommon. I don't want to highlight this moment as, something that's worse than it's ever been. But I do think what we're seeing will get worse. We've seen street battles. It was only about a month and a half ago we saw the Proud Boys and Patriot Prayer engaging in a full-on street brawl with anti-fascists. It's ridiculous. But I think when you see things like this, it shows you that it's going to keep happening. I've asked some people who are older, and they told me this never happened. There were some protests, like the Democratic Convention in '68. There was the battle in Seattle. But this is a whole new level of incivility, of anger and malice. It's one thing when someone says, "Hey man, I'm going to protest accountability." It's another thing when you have a bunch of people in the street screaming and yelling, chasing people down and beating them. It's really funny to me how there are people who used to be aligned with the libertarian left, right? Kind of where I line up on the spectrum as a social liberal. Now they're authoritarian left, and they're accusing me of being right-wing because I'm not authoritarian. This says to me, it's getting worse. It will get worse. We are in a cold civil war. The divide that I'm facing between me and the left isn't that I'm right-wing, by no means. It's that I defend positions of liberty, freedom, civility, nonviolence, and they don't. They go in the streets and scream white supremacist and attack people. And it is only going to get worse. Now, admittedly, I will point out again, this is a specific protest about a specific action. It's not like this is indicative of, just random unrest happening in the United States. But it does happen. And that's what Andy No's point was. He said, this is the type of street anarchy that routinely happens where he lives. And he highlights just, the things they're doing. He has a story. He said Saturday's street takeover was just one in a string of events where the city's leaders abdicated responsibility to uphold the rule of law. Here's an example I investigated from the summer that lasted for weeks. And this story he posted is from August. and it's where an occupation surrounded the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement building. There's a fine line between protest and just anarchy. And a lot of people are highlighting this, saying it's total anarchy taking over the streets of Portland. And I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't say that Portland has collapsed to anarchy, but I would say that Portland is probably one of the most terrifying places I've been to in terms of protest. They were posting photos of people. They were like putting stickers on the wall saying like, this person is a Nazi, this person is alt-right. Maybe they are. Maybe it's true. The Pacific Northwest is a crazy, crazy place. So it's just, I guess the point I want to make, in the last video I talked about the divide, the information gap that's driving us apart. But now I think what scares me the most about some of these instances, we can look at what happened to me in Milwaukee a couple of years ago, where they were screaming, get the white people, running up to cars and pulling people out and beating them. An 18-year-old white kid got shot in the neck. Do I think that white people are oppressed? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. But I am saying that there's a certain group of people that absolutely hate white people and will probably target you and beat you and insult you simply for being white. There's a difference between the government, putting restrictions on white people and talking about racism against white people, and the fact that there are a lot of racists in this country who hate white people and are willing to attack them. This kind of stuff is rather worrisome for me because it keeps happening, it keeps getting worse, and I think it could only get worse. Anyway, stick around. I've got one more video coming up in just a few minutes. This one's going to talk about whether or not George Soros is paying for protests. So that'll be on my channel in a few minutes.